Welcome back to All Things Monmouth County and Real Estate. I'm Nicole Rabbat Levine, and today we're diving into the real questions buyers and sellers have, but don't always get to ask until they're already in the middle of a move. I'm joined by three experts who are in the trenches every single day. Josh, a seasoned real estate attorney, Ashleigh from a leading title company, and Kristen, a mortgage professional. We're pulling back the curtain to share what's really happening in today's market, what can trip you up, and what can save money, and what you need to know before making your next move. Kristen, how have rate fluctuations changed what buyers should do first?
So I think regardless of what market or rate environment we're in, I think the first step is always the same, which is contacting a trusted lender. They're going to help you figure out your budget. They're going to figure your buying power, come up with a comfortable monthly payment. And then instead of just handing a pre-approval and setting them on their way, you should work with a lender that is going to give you updates on how the rates are impacting their buying power. So if we have a recent rate drop, clients should be reached out to by their mortgage professional, who should tell them how much their buying power is going to change with these rate fluctuations. So I think it's really just staying engaged with the local lender who's going to help you navigate the market.
Makes sense. To at least know what your buying power is before you actually start going out there and searching for homes.
That's right. So my first question is generally, what is your comfortable monthly payment, right? So before we talk about purchase price or area, I generally am asking, what is comfortable for you? And a lot of people aren't going to know that, right? So sometimes we'll drill down into their budgets, talk about what their current housing expenses look like. If you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, could you go up to $2,500 for a mortgage? What purchase price do we back into there? And then we kind of set that parameter, link up with the realtor, make sure they know this is where we want to stay comfortably, and then we can adjust it as the market changes.
Right, and that changes based on town too, because taxes are different in each town.
Right.
HOAs.
That's it.
They're looking at condos and townhomes.
Right. There's so many variables with each property, right? Some are going to be in a flood zone. Some are going to have higher insurance costs. Some are going to have higher taxes. So what we do is I usually ask for about 2 to 3 examples of properties they might have found on an MLS or Zillow. We'll run through numbers together so they kind of get a varying idea of this is what a condo looks like in this area. This is what a single family in this county looks like. And they can see the difference. And then I stay engaged with them throughout the transaction, that as they're finding homes that might check a lot of their boxes, send that address to me, and then we can find out what's comfortable. If you keep saying it's outside my budget, then I know we need to scale down a little bit. Right. And we keep a little bit of a buffer in there for variables, because you might find the perfect home and then it has solar panels and you have to pay for the lease agreement, right?
Solar panels.
Right. Good old solar panels.
We have our feelings on solar panels.
Yes. Everything's perfect until we see the solar panel.
Right. Which is a whole different conversation in and of itself.
Exactly.
So, Josh, how are contract negotiations different now compared to a few years ago? What are you seeing?
So I think what's happening now is the contingencies are sort of going back to where they were pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So during COVID, it was such a seller's market, especially in this area and most areas. But at that time, buyers were waiving their appraisal contingency. Buyers were waiving inspections, sometimes completely, against agent advice or against attorney advice. And you see that much less now. What we're really seeing is more maybe limited inspections, whether it's environmental, structural, mechanical. But what we understand, right, because we do this every day, that's actually really not limiting it at all. Mm-hmm. It's a good selling point for a seller, and it's a good way to get the deal done. But if you're going after environmental, structural, mechanical, there's really not much, in safety. There's not much else out there, that could be an actual defect. The buyers are, although the rates are where they are, there's not a lot of inventory. It's not really a buyer's market still. And so they're taking back and they're saying, well, I want to get this house, but I want to have the right inspections, or I'm not going to waive my appraisal anymore. I'm not doing that anymore.
I see a lot more resistance with buyers.
Right. Yeah. And I think they're right to do so. I mean, I thought that, and we've done many where, and some even really good friends of ours where completely waiving inspections against our advice, and mm-hmm. It may or may not have gone well, or it didn't, but you waive your inspection. I mean, that's huge. You could be walking into a $100,000 structural problem and you're just saying, I don't care. Mm-hmm. Because people wanted so badly to move during COVID. Everyone just wanted to get out of the house somehow, and so now it's sort of going back to the way it was, because pre-COVID, it was our attorney review letters were pretty broad in terms of buyer inspections, and no one really fought back about it. It was just, it's a defect. We can ask about it. If you can't figure it out, we terminate, and that's it. And during COVID, it really got in that waiver, area, and now you're sort of pulling back and going back to where we were.
So that actually brings me to another question. Do you see a clause or legal protection that sellers generally overlook, and you feel they should pay attention to in this real estate market?
Yeah, and I think sellers and buyers need to pay attention to this. And it's the phrase "as is," right? And because no one actually knows what that means, even my trusted colleagues and professionals, attorneys that I deal with all the time, agents, mortgage. As is a term of art, and every residential real estate contract in New Jersey is as is. But it's as is, subject to the buyer's right to inspect. And then at the same time, a seller is never, unless they agree to it, obligated to make a repair or provide a credit. So I see a lot of deals that still come in my door where we say, well, we're doing inspections for informational purposes only. Well, client, what does that mean to you? Because sometimes where an agent, is not explaining it properly, say, oh, well, we can do inspections there for informational, and if we find out information we don't like, we're going to terminate. Well, no, pump the brakes, because I don't think that's what the seller thinks it means. And so then in attorney review, you got to figure that out. So again, I'm looking at the inspection language and as is, and the amount of discussions I've had about it, about what it actually means when it gets to my desk, could be significantly different than what the buyer or seller understood it to mean, when they sign that initial offer contract.
So really, it's up to us as the realtors to explain to our clients what that means, and to have them call you ahead of time, maybe even before attorney review, to get an idea of what that means.
Absolutely. A really good agent, a worthwhile agent, is going to explain these details properly, and make sure the client understands it. They're going to send them to the right attorney who's going to also explain it, and really take the time to explain what this means, what are the potential pitfalls, that type of thing. We're not just trying to get a deal done. I mean, at the end of the day, we want things to close, right? That's how we make our living, is what we want to do. But we also want people to have a good understanding, have their eyes wide open of what they're getting themselves into.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then, there's this idea that buyers have that they can ask for a credit, right? And we see this a lot, where during inspections, we're negotiating, they ask for a credit, but then we have to turn to the lender, right? And make sure that they can actually receive that credit.
Right. There's limitations in terms of the seller's credit being applied to only prepaids, closing costs and prepaids. So anything above that, if your closing costs are working out to be $15,000 and you're getting a $20,000 credit, you would then look to apply that $5,000 as a price reduction. So I run it for clients both ways, as price reductions, as, reducing their closing cost. And generally it's going to be a split between the two, just to make sure that their monthly payments are manageable and that they do maybe have some extra cash at hand to fix repairs or whatever's come up.
Right. And, as part of those closing costs, we kind of parlay into title, right? And a lot of times buyers, especially first-time home buyers, they're like, what is title? Who's the title company?
Right.
So, if you can just touch upon how you're involved in the transaction, Ashleigh, and what are some scams that you're seeing right now? Because we're unfortunately, well, thankfully, we're not, we're not seeing this with us, but there are so many scams out there right now. And what do buyers and sellers need to be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I get involved immediately after attorney review. The attorney will order the title work from the title company, and then we kind of work with the bank. We work with the attorneys. We put a detailed report together of what has to be paid off at closing, what the liens are, what the judgments are. Anything open will be in our title report, and that goes to the bank, that goes to both attorneys. We also act as settlement agent on the transaction, which means we're the one dispersing all of the funds, cutting all of the checks, handling all of the money, all of the money in, all of the money out. It runs through our trust account. And I think it's really important to work with reputable professionals, because there are so many scams out there. Wire fraud was on the news for years and years and years. We're all sick and tired of hearing about wire fraud, and it's gone beyond that. Now we have, people whitewashing checks, pulling checks out of a post office, changing the payee on the check, putting it into their name. I mean, if the scammers out there took all of their knowledge and expertise and used it for good,
I know.
they would be well above everybody else. Another scam we're seeing is with vacant property.
Yes.
So
I
mean,
received
that's
a phone call on this as well from
Right.
a seller that was looking to sell vacant land, but couldn't prove that they owned it, wouldn't send me their identification. It came to be that it's a scammer.
So what we tell people, because normally as a realtor, you know where your referrals are coming from.
Right.
Somebody's not calling you, oh, I have $1 million piece of land to sell, and you have no idea where that referral came from. So I always tell my agents, ask for 2 forms of ID. Apparently, it's very easy to make a fraudulent driver's license. It's not as easy to get a passport. So I always say, if you have a bad feeling, just ask for a copy of the passport. And normally they won't be able to produce that. The other red flags are if they want to close very quickly and they want to price under market value. We've had some of these transactions almost make it to closing. Because think of the attorney. You have a seller, Nicole is the realtor, writes a contract, sends it to the attorney, cash deal. You may not meet your client until the day of closing.
Sometimes you don't meet them at all.
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes everything's done remote. So even if they come into the office of the attorney, they have a driver's license that has their photo, has the name on the deed. Pretty much you're good to go unless there were any other red flags. So I know title companies and attorneys have put in precautions to try and prevent that, but it really comes down to, the gut feeling sometimes and going from there. Another scam we have is people who own property free and clear, no mortgage on the property. People will try and file a deed transferring that property into their name.
The scammers.
Scammers. Unfortunately, it's pretty easy to do if you think like a fraudster. I mean, you can go online, pull a copy of the deed, draft it yourself in Word, have a notary, which there's thousands of them around, have a fraudulent notary, notarize your signature, and you record it in the county clerk. You can hypothetically take over that property, okay? There are precautions. We tell all of our clients at closing, every realtor, mortgage, attorney seminar we do, we tell them to have their clients sign up for the property fraud alerts.
Yes.
Most counties in New Jersey offer it. It's a free service. You just put in your name and your email, and anytime anything is recorded in your name, you'll get an email alert. So it's a good way, because we as a title company, when we start a transaction, we have to file something called a notice of settlement, and that puts the world on notice that this property is going to sale. So that would be a red flag, because there would be an email going to the real owner of that property, and they would say, wait, I'm not doing anything with my home. And it has the attorney information or the title company information that filed that. So they would call that title company and say, hey, I'm not selling my property.
So why is title insurance so important?
Because of all of those reasons, honestly. Because of all of those reasons. Unfortunately, title insurance does protect you moving backwards. It's not like homeowners insurance that protects you for things that happen after you take possession of the property. It protects you from things that happened before you took possession of the property. So if, for example, taxes weren't paid on a property, that would be the requirement of the settlement agent to pay. If they didn't collect something at closing that should have been paid off, once that closing happens, we're on the hook for it. So if there was an old mortgage that we didn't pay off, or we wired funds to, a different entity and didn't do it correctly, we could potentially be on the hook for all of that. And it does happen, I'll knock on wood. Knock on wood. It hasn't happened with our company, but I get phone calls from my realtor clients. It's happened with other local title companies, and it can be an absolute disaster. And not just because that deal didn't get done, but it can have ramifications on the buyer or seller's credit moving forward to their next property if that doesn't get resolved quickly. I know there was a situation, that exact situation, the mortgage wire was not sent to the correct party, and it was a domino effect, and it wasn't addressed for a year and a half. Long story short, that individual was not able to buy a new home because their credit was shot from that incident.
So it's really important
It's
who you
really
work with,
important
and
who
to
you
make
work
sure
with.
you get title insurance and do everything that you're, advised to do by the professional, and not just think we're, saying these things for our health. We hear these stories and we're trying to prevent, our buyers and sellers from losing the property or losing a lot of money. Do you have a story that you want to share about that?
I'm all ready to talk about scams. Yes, because it's so prevalent in this industry, right? So
unfortunately,
what I find, because mortgages and deeds are public record, it is, the perfect opportunity for a scammer to see that, yes, they just closed on a mortgage, and they will start sending mail out that looks like it's from advisors. There's very small print that says this is not affiliated with your mortgage company, but they're going to mimic it.
Pretend that
They're going to say your loan amount. They're going to talk about your closing date, little important pieces of information. So before every closing, I'm getting on a call with the clients and explaining this to them, showing them examples of it. And we remind them usually about 2 weeks after closing that anything you get that doesn't look legitimate, send a picture, send it my way. I'll make sure. But the things that I'm seeing look more and more credible every day. So it really is hard. They're selling them, expired home warranties, which are not part of this transaction. They're telling them that they've missed a mortgage payment where they can refinance for 3%, just to get the client's information, to get them to pay some additional things. So really just making sure that your clients know that this is going to happen to them inevitably, and just how to protect yourself, I think, is the most important piece.
And it's really just calling us.
Right. Exactly.
Did you actually send this letter?
Yeah.
Right. And you'll research and find out if this actually happened to them or if this is a piece of trash mail.
Right, exactly. So I'll have access to every letter that's been sent out recently, so I'll be able to confirm if it was legitimate. Usually I can tell right away by some of the language in there, but some of it really is tricky, and not all of them comply with the small fine print.
Right.
So it does look scary to a lot of clients, maybe especially first-time home buyers who don't know what's legitimate. You get a lot of mail after you buy a home.
For sure.
So really just navigating that and being able to still talk to your trusted professionals long after you close, I think is key.
Absolutely.
The first of all, if you buy a house, get title insurance. The amount of times, the amount of times, it's shocking to me actually. The amount of times I have to explain to a client not what it is, because it's fine if you don't know what it is. But after I've explained to you what it is, you're buying a $750,000 home. Title insurance is going to cost you $4,500. I mean, literally, for most of us, it's the biggest purchase of your life. You're not going to get that insured. You're not going to take insurance out to make sure that what you're buying is legitimate and that there are no liens, there are no encumbrances, there's nothing that can come up after closing that's going to bite you that happened in the past. It boggles my mind, and I almost always convince them to get the insurance if there's someone who really is against it. Although I think maybe a couple of times, people, and we have them sign waivers. I mean, if they don't want to do it, we make them sign waivers and the whole thing. But then along the fraud, and this is minor in comparison, but and I'm sure you tell them, and I know Ann tells them at the table, the deed. When you get the deed, I mean, the title company is responsible for getting the deed back to you. They're going to send the original back to you, but you're going to get all the things in the mail that say, "Hey, pay us $250 and we'll go get your deed." Well, you're literally giving someone $250 for nothing.
Yeah, they have a certified copy at the table at closing. We take the original, we have it recorded. Now, most deeds are e-filed, so we hold on to the original until it comes back recorded, and then we mail it to the homeowner with their title insurance policy, usually like a month after closing. So we do, every time we have people review their names on the deed, we confirm if they're married, how they want to take title, and then we do tell them that information because they will get those letters. And if you're a young homeowner, you think, oh my gosh, of course I need a certified copy of my deed.
Right.
Let me mail that check right away. And it is a minor scam, but it happens a lot. We've actually had payoffs that are, fraudulent payoffs that come in. We have certain companies that we can't wire to because they're so fraudulent, and we have to get bank statements. So it is, or mortgage statements, because you have to kind of take a couple steps back to prevent the fraud. And that's why I think working with a good team of people who are really experienced and aren't just get to the closing table. Who cares? Waive everything, let's just close. I move in, everybody gets paid,
Right.
It's all good. But then you have all these post-closing issues that come up. So I really think it's so important to just, work with good people who are there to protect you.
I almost say, think of it as your own little team throughout the transaction. Yeah. We're all working in your best interest together.
Yeah.
So when you have, a buyer or a seller working with a realtor, and then, their brothers, sisters, friends, uncles, and whatever, attorney that practices marital law that will do the real estate transaction. It's really hard because we are talking the entire transaction most times behind the scenes, and the client doesn't even know, because we don't want to worry them unnecessarily. So we're all having those conversations behind.
Right, exactly. So I think in terms of when you said that, like in a low appraisal, before the client is contacted, I'm calling the realtor and we're strategizing, getting extra comps, trying to work it out with the appraisal
Right.
because we don't want to share any alarming news without having a solution first, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think a lot of people understand that there is this team working collectively behind the scenes,
Right.
brainstorming, how do we make sure our client is protected? How do we get to the closing table, and then how do we educate the clients to make sure that we're all on the same page together?
Exactly. Any of you have a story you want to share about a time where a client could have risked a lot of money or risked the deal and what you did to prevent that? I mean, we could share thousands of stories.
How much time do you have?
I know, right.
Yeah.
For me, it usually comes down to the finances, right? So I think a lot of times what I see happen is if I do get a client that has been pre-approved by another lender, I would always ask for a copy of the loan estimate. And I tell them you're either going to leave with peace of mind that you truly have a great deal, or you're going to have transparency into what these fees and charges are, or maybe they're not letting you know exactly what you're going to be paying and what this fee is for. So I say either you get a great deal with them, or I'm going to be able to do better. So a lot of times what I've been seeing in a lot of the loan estimates that I receive is that someone will tell me I'm getting a $10,000 credit from the bank. It's a large big box bank and they're giving a $10,000 credit. And then when we go to look into it, the rate that they're quoting for that is higher than the market rate. So yes, of course you should get a credit, right? But you can also get a rate at par and not have to pay or bring the normal amount of closing costs.
Right.
So a lot of times it's really just educating the clients. They get a list of a loan estimate and they're looking at all of these fees, not knowing what's an estimate, what's real, where is there a little bit of negotiability within it. So I walk them through each section and make sure that they understand this is a fee that you're going to pay no matter what. This is something that is going to be particular to the lender. Here's what we charge. Here's what they're charging you. And now you can make an educated decision. So I think a lot of times if people just hear, oh, this person is giving me a 5% rate, but you're paying $10,000 for that, is that really the best deal at the end of the day? So I think for me, a lot of, things come down to just having a second look, running it by another trusted lender that you might have just to make sure, is this the best program for me? Is this the best rate for me? Here's my long-term goals. Here's what I'm trying to do short-term. Does this align with what I'm trying to do? And more times than not, I do find that a lot of lenders are just steering it to whatever profits them the most.
Exactly. Unfortunately.
Right.
I always say you have to compare apples to apples.
Right.
If someone's giving you an outstanding rate, there's usually a catch to that.
Exactly.
And they don't realize that until they sometimes even get to closing.
Right. And sometimes there are estimates that I come across that really do look fantastic, but just because I've taken the time of breaking it down and explaining it to them and, just educating them on what the process is, they'll go with a slightly higher rate or more expensive fees just because they want that level of service that they know that anything that comes their way throughout this transaction and years after, that they have somebody they can go back to and, check in on rates, see how the market's doing. Can they remove PMI? So it's really about building a relationship, not just what is my interest rate.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I mean, and Kristen and I have been involved in many deals, and there's one I'm thinking of in particular. The client was great, but I forget exactly what happened, but something happened with their finances. They were in a certain type of loan. We thought the deal was absolutely dead, and I will say with confidence that if it was at almost any other lender, it would have died because of what happened, and literally within like 28 hours. I think the deal was back on with a different deal, different approvals. I mean, there was something with state review. I forget. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I do know it, yes.
Yeah. But it was, I mean, that's what we're talking about like trust and having a good team and using someone who not only has experience, but has experience here, right? Because just because you're a good mortgage broker and you work out of Connecticut doesn't mean you're a good mortgage broker, in New Jersey, in Central Jersey. And same thing with attorneys or agents and things like that. I mean, we had a deal recently where
I know exactly which deal you're
and I'm just going to say trust, right? Where we had a deal where, it had fallen apart once or twice before where I wasn't involved or Nicole wasn't involved. You got new attorneys on the deal. The other attorney is someone who I have a lot of respect for and like working with. And we'll have fights, we're advocating for our clients, but we also know at the end of the day, like we're doing the right thing, and the reason why the deal died, I think the first time was because neither of the clients, I think his client and my client were both equally distrusting of everybody and questioned a whole lot of things. made things much more difficult than it needed to be, and things almost really fell apart many times because the client had a lack of trust in the process and trust in their chosen professionals through nothing we did. It was just history and their personalities and whatever. And the deal eventually happened and it was great. But this seller who absolutely needed to sell this house could not hold on to it for any longer. I mean, if this deal fell apart, they were facing a lot of ramifications, and we were able to hold it together despite both clients, so ours and the buyer's lack of trust in their professionals in the process,
Yeah.
I think hiring a good attorney is a really good place to start for a client, because we've had situations where people don't use attorneys, or like you said, use their brother-in-law who does, divorce work, in New York or whatever.
Right.
And it really is a disservice to the client, because there are provisions that they put in attorney review that can save them money and protect them,
And what's wild, not every state has it's not an attorney review state. So many states, even southern New Jersey, close with title companies. And so we'll have clients that are moving either from, here to South New Jersey or Florida or wherever it may be. And they're going, well, I don't have an attorney there. Why do I need an attorney here? And then once they get through the process, they're like, that's why I need an attorney here.
Right. Because especially if there's an attorney on the other side,
Absolutely.
And a specific real estate attorney is really what they want. We've had situations where buyers are coming to us, well, why wasn't this tax assessment discussed with us? I'm like, that would have been a provision in your attorney review process.
Right.
And then your attorney would be going back to their attorney to negotiate that. We as a title company can offer legal advice. We can handle the transactional end of it, but we're not reviewing the contract or inspection items or what have you. On the title side, we always educate our clients to order a preliminary title search if they think there could be potential issues. And that can definitely save people time and money. I had a recent situation where after a seminar, a realtor ordered a tideland search on a waterfront property. And it turns out these people had lived there for 30 years. They had a 1% claim right down the middle of their property. So that's pretty significant. So,
for those who may be listening that don't know what that means, a 1% claim, what does that mean?
So it's a 1% ownership of the state of New Jersey for tidelands, which is water ran through that property at one point, and the state of New Jersey has a claim to that portion of the property. And there was no grant or permission issued from the state of New Jersey. So our advice was to go back to the prior title company, because they should have taken an exception to that claim, and they did not. So now the title company, this is another reason why you need title insurance.
Yes.
Because that title company is now on the hook for curing that claim, which could be, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
As opposed to the homeowner.
Right. So that's a perfect example of why you need your title insurance and to keep your title insurance policy.
Right.
Because if they didn't have their physical policy, then they would have maybe had an issue pursuing that claim.
For sure.
That's huge, keeping your policy.
Yeah.
The amount of times we've had to search for policies because there's some exception that wasn't caught first time around. And there's so many title companies that are, fly by night. They open up one day and they're closed the next, and they're gone, and you can't find them, and you can't find any of their files. And what is that homeowner supposed to do at that point?
Yeah, because they're not recorded. We were talking about deeds. The deeds are recorded in the county. The title policies are not. So they're retained by the homeowners, their attorney, and the title company.
And how long does an attorney hold on to someone's title policy?
By law, it's 7 years.
Yeah. 7 years.
Yeah.
So after 7 years.
Yeah, we're off the hook. I mean, now, practically, do we clean out our files? No. But, I mean, we're off the hook. Yeah, they're in a basement somewhere, but,
Now that everything's, more digital,
right.
A lot of people have electronic records. So we even have like a separate server of really old files that
up
we
in
can,
the cloud somewhere.
Up in the cloud.
Whatever that means.
Right over here. Yeah.
If a buyer or seller could ask an insider question of your profession to avoid a major headache, what would it be?
Use the right mortgage company. And I say that because I'm in the middle of something right now where I have my buyer. We should have closed this morning, actually, and it's had to go back to underwriting because the mortgage company missed something. It's a large, semi-bank who advertises on TV. So my rule of thumb when it comes to insurance and mortgage companies, for the most part, I can't say this for 100%, if you're advertising on TV, not a company you're looking to go for, if you're like doing national advertising. And it's a company where mortgage, they got an office in New York, they've got an office in Mumbai, they've got an office in California, and multiple hands on the file. If I've got an issue and Kristen's on the file, I just call Kristen. That's literally, buyers don't understand how much, and now we literally could have closed this morning, but we can't now because, again, and solely on the mortgage company. And that would not have happened with the lenders that we prefer, that we would refer to. It just doesn't happen.
And then there's that domino effect. So if, let's say, the seller needs to close because they're buying something, their stuff's on the moving truck.
Yep.
And now you didn't close this morning because the lender won't answer their phone because they're in California and they're 3 hours behind. So you're supposed to close at 9 a.m., but it's 6 a.m., right?
Yeah,
like there's that
100%,
whole domino effect that we have seen time and time again. Whereas to your point, Kristen literally will show up. Like she's like 15 minutes away. She'll come to the closing and be like, I'm here to make sure everything's okay.
Yeah.
I agree. Team.
Yeah, we were working on it I can't even say last night. It's yesterday afternoon and it's 4:28. And they email me and say, well, the closer's going home for the day, so we're going to pick this up in the morning. What?
Like, we're closing.
No, we're literally closing tomorrow. We don't have cash. And of course, there was an issue, and now it's back to under. So not something you're going to get with a team that's recommended by, a good agent. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be any of us. But, people who are competent, who do a good job, who care about the client and not just the closing, they're going to refer to good people to do a good job.
Right. And we have been working in the industry for many years, independently and collectively. So we tend to know who those people are, who those players are. When a realtor on the other side of the transaction is someone that I've worked with before, or they're really well respected in the industry, there's like that feeling because they're going to do things the way it should be done, as opposed to just let the attorney handle it. Well, no, we need to talk about things too. Same thing with lenders and everything like that. When I receive a pre-approval letter from a buyer and they're like, well, or even on the seller side, let's say I'm representing a seller and I receive offers and there's a lender from God knows where, never heard their name. It was just a click that the buyer did on the computer to say you're approved.
Right.
I'm cautioning sellers with that and saying, this is someone I've never dealt with and it's a company, or it could be someone I've dealt with and say, this is a company that's not local. I've had a pre-approval letter come through from a non-local lender and, the buyers, when it came time to their appraisal, we were in Middletown. And if anyone knows anything about Middletown, it's huge. Right. And there's different areas within Middletown. So the home is in Lincroft and you're using Comps and Leonardo or vice versa. And it's not the same type of market, even though it says Middletown. But the appraiser doesn't know that because they're not from the area. They're just, from a different state. And this particular appraiser was from New York and they were doing the appraisal here. So that's really important to use.
Yeah, we see that often. So a lot of the more national mortgage lenders are going to be using appraisers from all different areas. So one of the things that may sound like a sales pitch when I'm talking to a prospective client is about the importance of having somebody who knows the local market, right? Who's gonna, to your point, is gonna see my mortgage company and my name on a pre-approval and say, I've worked with them. I know that you're gonna be in good hands, right? I know that their appraisers are really knowledgeable about the area. I like to kind of sometimes pick appraisers on my panel in certain areas because they live and know that area very well. To your point, Middletown could be very different depending on which town that you're looking in. Exactly. So that is something that I try to educate clients on, that if you are shopping for the lowest rate and you come across a bank that we've never heard before, these are other challenges that you need to consider, right? The transaction is only as smooth as your team is. So each transaction, we keep putting together these new teams, right? And if there's one person, if it's the lender who is slow to respond, doesn't have much pull through with underwriting, or, can't dictate where the area of the appraiser is going to be coming from, a lot of that is going to impact you financially. Like you said, it's going to be a domino effect with other transactions. So it really is important to focus on who's on your team and can they work well together and how well do they know this area.
Right. And, knowing the areas really well and also making sure that they're specific to real estate when it comes to the attorney side of things. Sometimes I will get that person who says, I'm using our divorce attorney who could also do real estate or whatever it might be.
It's always a cousin.
It's always someone's cousin.
It is a cousin.
And, they're in court all day. So they're not answering, true story, did not answer the attorney review letter. Someone wound up placing a better offer. I had a buyer. placed a better offer and kicked us out because their attorney, who was a family friend, didn't respond because they were in court all day.
Right.
So 2 days passed, and
Right.
unfortunately, so then they used my recommended attorney,
Yeah.
one of my recommended attorneys, and it went really smoothly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think team is really the most important thing. And there are going to be issues. There are going to be challenging
right.
transactions. Like, even if you have the best team in the world, whoever the top team is, there's still going to be challenges that come up. But I think it's like managing the expectations of the clients. If an issue comes up, everybody's going to let the buyer and seller know, hey, we have this issue. We may not hit our closing date.
Right.
Something came up, So I think that's important to note as well. But, on the title side, we have a high level of experienced people in the office. Like I just had an issue this morning come up. Another agent had a listing and she had a deal under contract. The title company couldn't issue a policy on the deal. She sent everything to us. We would absolutely issue a policy. But that deal got killed just because the title company did not have the experience. So,
and we see that too many
times. Just not having the level of expertise, because if we insure over something, we're protecting the client.
Right.
And if we make a bad business decision, then we're on the hook for it.
Right. Not
So,
the client.
Not the client. So I think that's important to,
Right.
notate too. And no one realizes that until it, blows up.
And talk about saving a deal. We just had one, you mentioned it earlier, but, I dealt with a seller and I was representing them, and their attorney and the other attorney couldn't see eye to eye, nor did they want to work through the issues of attorney review. The other attorney canceled the entire transaction.
Right.
I called up the other realtor, who's a great realtor, and we worked it out, and we hired 2 new attorneys. My client finally used my recommended attorney.
Right.
So they called up Josh, and we put the deal back together, closed. Both parties are extremely happy at this point. Had they if they didn't have people advocating for them, that would have been a dead deal, and who knows if they would have seen another offer at this point.
Exactly.
But, so just it goes to show that there's so many obstacles that arise during a real estate transaction. But, what we're seeing in the market right now, as we mentioned earlier, buyers are a little bit more price conscious. They're not willing to throw the shirt off their back in inspections or whatever it might be. But one of the biggest challenges my buyers face when they're going for financing is many times they're up against a cash offer. So when I put them, when I recommend you and they call you, what strategies do you come up with to make their offers stronger without necessarily putting down more money, or, what advice do you generally give them?
So I think when you're talking about structuring the best offer for the client situation, there's a couple things that we take into account. And this is, again, where they have probably already heard this from you. So it's really just me validating what you have said, or sometimes borrowers do need to hear it twice just to fully understand it. But we're talking about terms. So flexibility is usually going to be the, one of the biggest things. If you're able to close quickly and have a lender who's going to be able to close quickly, maybe you can win that deal against a cash offer that's going to need a month until their finances are all sorted out and ready to go. Conversely, if it's a buyer that, can take a little bit of a longer time to close, maybe the sellers need 6+ months until they find their home, that flexibility I think is key and is going to help you compete with cash offers. Then it's going to come down to the financing. So sometimes, it's going to be the loan program, how much you're putting down, some of those contingencies that we talked about. We're going to look for appraisal waivers. If I receive a systematic appraisal waiver, well, now we don't have the risk of a low value, right? That takes that mortgage contingency piece of it off. And especially if we are able to get it through underwriting very quickly, that's how I generally compete with cash offers, is I will call the listing agent and say that I believe this client's pre-approval is as good as cash. And here's why. It's already been through underwriting. We've collected everything. We just need a few more documentation pieces about the contract and things that will come later on in the transaction. But there's no question about this borrower's financing, right? So I think sometimes just giving them that assurance, because a lot of listing agents have gotten the cash offer and then saw the switcheroo where they're really getting financing, or, there are gifts involved and there's money moving around. So I think to at least have a lender call the listing agent and say, this client is highly qualified, excellent credit, ample assets. They've been through underwriting. They've been at their job for 15 years. there's no reason that I can foresee based on their financing that this is not going to close. That's been enough to win the deals, right? And if it's really a true competitive offer, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the listing agent is trying to steer their clients to how do you net the most amount of profit with the least amount of risk, right? So cash is king to some people, and that's all they're going to see. But if they have a truly educated realtor and a truly educated, lender who's advocating for clients, they're going to see that it's not as simple as comparing cash versus a mortgage, right? There's risks associated with each. Who is being the most flexible in terms of their contingencies, and who do we think is going to be most likely to get to the closing table?
Right.
Another thing, I'm sorry, is just that, a lot of move-up buyers have equity in their homes, and they don't realize that you can tap into it now through a home equity line, through a bridge loan, through all of these different programs that we have, that you can take cash out. And sometimes if you're downsizing, put an all-cash offer in and not have to sell your home and pay off the home equity line when you sell your house, right? So I think
We've done
that
quite a few times.
we do that a lot. That's how we've won a lot of deals, is if everything looks right, but you have a sale contingency and that's going to be a red flag, how do we avoid that? So we'll go through all the different situations for that client. Can your debt to income ratio support carrying 2 homes plus a HELOC? How does that look financially? What are the costs to consider? And really just, make sure that they understand that they have options. They don't have to sell their home and then find somewhere to go temporarily. They don't have to try to line up the transaction exactly. There are a lot of opportunities and strategies that we can use to make sure that you can get your offer accepted and then worry about selling your house.
Yeah. And as far as the buy side of things, what is the most common deal killer that you see?
I mean, the most common deal killer, I think, is I'm going to say 2 things, so it's not really answer the question, but I'm going to say 2 things. One is sale contingencies, right? Sale contingencies, and I think just piggybacking on what you said, sale contingencies without context, without exploration, very stringent sale contingencies, and then being too aggressive when it comes to inspections. You agree to a certain thing, you agree to a certain contingency in the initial deal, in the initial contract, and as long as your agent has explained it to you properly, you shouldn't be coming to me and saying, well, I know I agreed to limit it to structural and environmental, but I really want to go after mechanical and some other things. Well, when you do that, an attorney review, listen, we do it all the time, but when you do that, you're sending a message to the other side and saying, I'm not willing to live up to my word, right? And I'm going to be a pain in the butt, throughout this transaction.
That sets the tone for the transaction.
It sets the tone, and that's a terrible tone to set. And you want to be, and that's, again, I know it's like a theme, and not the intention, but if you have a good agent who is explaining the contingencies properly, I should not have to do a whole bunch of heavy lifting in attorney review to modify things, at least the contingency side of things. Because you get it. You know what you're getting yourself into because the agent explained it to you, right? And really because they know what they're doing as well. So I think being inflexible, ultimately, and asking for things that you just shouldn't be asking for, in inspections. For everyone out there, inspections is not a time to renegotiate the price of the contract. It is a time to address legitimate defects within the property. That's
well
it.
said.
We need to underline that.
I know. Say it louder for the
that.
people.
I mean, it's just not,
Yeah,
Right.
It's so true. And then as far as the buyer side, what, Ashleigh, can they expect at closing that no one tells them about when it comes to the title side of things?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, discussing their goals and especially with their attorney, do they have a property to sell? Is the money going to be available for closing? Do they need 5 days to move money from investment accounts? Are they doing a same day closing? Are they not taking advantage of all of those great programs? Do we need to receive a wire from their title company on the same day of closing? Giving the information to your professionals is key before the closing. And good attorneys will ask these questions.
Right.
That's, again, why you should hire real estate attorneys, because they know what questions to ask. But as far as the day of closing, usually the figures will come in the day before. Our lenders will send a statement 3 days before closing, but that is not always the final. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. You really want to wait for your attorney to send you the final instructions. And I have a lot of buyers who come to me, they get the statement, they have no idea what they're get a check for $332,000 and show up tomorrow at 10 a.m. And they're like, oh my God, because they didn't work with a good lender who explained everything on the loan estimate. And I'm always happy to get on the phone with buyers the night before closing when they get their statement and go through everything with them line by line. Because I really do feel once we do that, all of their questions are answered.
Mm-hmm.
And then they walk into that closing like confident.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because they do have a lot of prepaids. They have the biggest questions we have are with HOA fees and taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, depending on, what time of the quarter they're closing, they're paying for the remainder of that quarter and possibly the next quarter, or putting money into their escrow account. And all they're seeing is, I'm paying taxes in 3 different locations.
Mm-hmm.
And once I explain to them, what that covers, same thing with HOA fees. Why am I paying $3,000 worth of HOA fees?
Right.
But once I say, all right, you're prepaid for the next 3 months, here's your working capital fee, here's whatever it is. Once I explain it to them, they're much more comfortable with it.
And many times buyers don't realize with homeowners insurance that they actually pay for
Same
the
thing,
year.
they're paying
for
the year.
Exactly.
And
And
then
then they're
escrow.
paying
But I
into
already
their
paid
escrow.
for it. Right.
And then it's in their monthly payment. So,
Exactly.
But again, once we go through it with them slowly, line by line, they're much more confident going into that closing. And again, the same day, same day transactions, because that could be a deal killer if they're selling their property and something happened with their sale.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only really surprise that should come up on the title side is an issue in the rundown. So a rundown is a search we do on the day of closing, bringing the file current. So let's just say we ordered title on, I don't know, September 1st, and we're closing on September 17th. We have to bring the file current. So we're always ordering that last minute search. It's pretty rare that something comes up, but that could cause a delay.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the only thing that could cause a delay on the title side, because if we're going to closing, we're clear to close.
Right.
Can I just say I don't like same day closings?
For the record.
For the record,
Right, for the
I
record.
think if there's any way to avoid a same day closing, you do a brief use and occupancy. As much as I don't like those agreements either, I think the amount of things
What do you like, Josh?
Yes, Josh. What's
I like
the-
everyone at this table.
Right.
I think the amount of potential things that can go wrong and do go wrong with same day closing. We talked about the domino effect earlier. Someone's got all their stuff on a truck, and then something comes up on a rundown, which is rare, which is
I
super
know.
rare. But someone
Anything happens.
Yeah, anything
You
happens.
go
And
to
it doesn't
a
matter what
Walmart,
happens.
there's a
There's a
seller
walkthrough.
didn't
There's a
remove
walkthrough.
all their stuff.
Or I had one
Yeah.
today. The seller turned off all the gas.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, we can't close, and the
Yeah.
gas company can't get back there till tomorrow afternoon.
Right.
There you go.
So we're not closing.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if you can avoid a same day closing, makes our lives less stressful.
Makes their lives less
Stressful, exactly.
Because
So-
if you do have those situations, like we had one a couple years ago where the whole house was still packed up, and they
Yes.
walked in for closing,
Yeah.
and our buyers had their stuff like on a moving truck, and it was during COVID, I think, and they were paying an arm and a leg for a mover, and they're sitting there for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then you have the buyers are just, you can see it in their face, and they're like, oh, where do you want me to sign? They have no idea what they're signing because they're so frazzled from all of that stress.
From all of the
Yeah.
walkthrough issues.
Yeah.
Shifting gears, because we've been talking a
Yeah.
lot about buyers, but looking at the seller side of things, why would you say it's as important for a seller to know what the pre-approval letter states, where it's coming from, the buyer's financing? Why is it so important for a seller to know that as much as the buyer knows that?
Right. Well, I think because there's risks on both sides, and even if you are obviously selling your home, you have purchased a home, so you can be a little bit understanding to the process. But so much has changed. So I think a lot of times, they're going to rely on their realtor to help them navigate again. How do we get the biggest profit with the least amount of risk? And pre-approvals, I mean, they're not all created equally,
No.
right? I'm sure you've seen some interesting ones, but for the most part, what I always suggest is that they make sure that these pre-approvals are up to date. A lot of times they're submitting out-of-date ones, which maybe the buyer's financing has changed in those last 3 months since they last connected. You want to check that the program and the loan amount matches up to what you're offering. A lot of times I get a contract that doesn't match up to what we had discussed or pre-approved them for. So really understanding that this pre-approval is a piece of paper that is going to allow you to look into the finances of what the buyers have right now and the likelihood of them being able to close on time. This piece of paper is really not going to give you much information other than the company that they're working for. So again, that matters. Do I recognize this lender? Have I worked with them before? What is their reputation? Do they know the local area? And if you don't know those things, what I always do just to make sure that the listing agent is fully sure about my process, how I run my team, and how the company works, I always call them. The first thing I do is email, you'll submit the offer, and then I echo what the realtor says, and I let them know that these are highly qualified borrowers, right? There's no question about their financing. They've been through underwriting. We can accommodate a quick close. Basically, whatever you need, we're here for if your sellers have questions. I then follow it up with a call and just make sure that the listing agent understands that I know what I'm talking about. We're going to get to closing.
Right.
I let them know that this client I've been working with a long time and they're really eager and I'm going to walk them through this. Do you have any concerns about this transaction? Is there anything I should know about the sellers? And sometimes just engaging them in those conversations really helps separate us from the other list of pre-approvals that you have there. So I think, if you just focus on bottom line and say, well, this is the highest offer, there's a chance that they're going to nickel and dime you for inspection or they're going to pull out last minute because their financing is shaky. So I think really understanding what these numbers mean and who you're going to be working with is key for the sellers to understand.
Definitely. And, in our current market, we're still seeing multiple offers. So from a legal standpoint, what's your advice to sellers on handling multiple offers fairly but strategically?
Going back to what, was said earlier, cash is king, but not always. If you're looking at multiple offers and someone's pre-qualified from some mortgage company you've never heard of or some company that's, out in Minnesota somewhere, probably not the offer. But if the offer is a mortgage contingency that's pre-approved and you got all that backing information, the amount of times I've had a cash offer attempt to turn into financing. And so what we do in attorney review as sellers attorneys, we put in language that says if you even, breathe the word that you're going for financing, it's a breach of contract right away. We're not going to act on it, but that's an offense under the contract, and we can take action if it becomes a problem, and then it won't delay anything, it won't do this. And sometimes the buyer's attorneys agree, and sometimes they say, well, they had the cash, now they don't, whatever. I mean, getting that pre-qual in, or getting the proof of funds in for a cash offer is really important. But I think that flexibility when a seller wants to sell a buyer, being flexible on move dates, inspection contingencies, things like that, which are really substantive, can absolutely outweigh a cash offer. And I would almost always prefer someone who is flexible on a closing date, who is not, not full inspections, but with a well-qualified, good mortgage company, someone that I know, someone that I've worked with before, and I know they know what they're doing and they're going to get us there, over some random investor who's got a whole bunch of cash, wants to then finance it through an LLC and cause all sorts of problems. And, we can say all the things we want about, well, it's a breach of contract and we're going to sue you and we're going to do this. We all know. The reality is that if someone breaches a residential real estate contract, it is rare that it gets to a litigation position, because who's paying for the lawyers, right? I mean, that ultimately, right? You're arguing over a $30,000 deposit. Well, if you want to go to trial on something, you're probably spending at least that much, if not more, once you get to trial eventually. So, we can talk tough and do all these things, but I think, I don't know, I'm sort of tangent here, but with the sellers, look at everything, and not everything is equal, and not all cash is better than a mortgage contingency.
And can we just touch on the closing date, because you mentioned closing dates?
Sure.
Closing dates are on or about?
Yes.
It's not set in stone.
Correct.
Okay.
It is not set in stone. I mean, there's little attorney language that we can sort of try to put into attorney review letters where we can make it a little more solidified. But there's a phrase that we all know, time of the essence.
Say it together.
So say it again, time of the essence. And time of the essence, what does that mean? That's a notice that the attorney will put out and say, whether it's a closing date or it's an inspection date, whatever the deadlines are, you can always make something time of the essence, as long as you've done it right in attorney review and have that right language. But closing dates are never set in stone. And a good attorney, a good agent, will always explain that to their clients, because and even if we explain it, 3 weeks later when the closing date's moving, you still got a client come back to you and say, why is it moving? I've got movers. Well, I know, but things happen. And even in the best transactions, there's always bumps. Things move around. There's never I don't know if I've ever had a transaction where I can look back and say, well, there were no issues there whatsoever. So closing dates move,
Right.
things happen, and you have to be ready for it.
Yeah, and especially if, let's say, you do have that domino effect, and maybe the buyer is coming from New York and they're selling their property in New York in order to buy your property. Well, the time of essence days, correct me if I'm wrong. We usually have about 10 days here.
10 days, correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but New York is closer to 30.
I believe New York is 30, yep.
So we both have moving targets. So the lineup is really important. And maybe that's the cash offer, and maybe that's the most risk.
Yeah, and
it could be.
Yeah. And rarely for me, rarely, but it's happened where we've made that closing date of the essence in attorney review because the seller had some burning need for it, like a legitimate need. But it's always, at the end, typically always floating, and you have to nail it down towards the end.
Yeah. And then especially, when it comes to title for a seller, can they do anything before accepting an offer to avoid any delays or obstacles?
Again, it goes back to the preliminary title searches. If they think they have it, you'll meet with sellers, they'll say, we know we have issues. We had a business, we have liens on the property from that business. We want to negotiate those liens. 100% they should run title at the time they're putting the property on the market, not when they're getting ready to close, especially if it's a buyer's market.
Right.
They're in a much better negotiating position if they can say, I already did my title work. We know we have no issues, or we're working through certain issues, because there are surprises that come up for sellers that they don't realize what they have. If it was possibly an estate situation, a divorce situation, we always recommend, it can't hurt.
Definitely.
It can't hurt. Then you know what your position is. Also, maybe sellers are out of state. They need to convey that information. Like, I am going to close remote. I need my money wired to such and such title company because I'm buying another property. So having that communication, I think, is key, and doing the preliminary work if needed.
For sure.
Is always helpful.
Now, I wish I had a crystal ball. I know we all wish we had crystal balls, but what do you see changing in our industry within the next 6 to 12 months? And how can buyers and sellers be proactive and prepare for that?
I don't know if I have an answer to this question, honestly. Look, it's ever changing. Even in years past, things that I thought would change down the road, just based on the industry, based on what's going on, didn't change the way I expected them to. So, I think I've been doing this almost 20 years. I think just taking it one day at a time and adjusting with the market as it changes, and keeping yourself, well educated as a professional, I think is really key, So I really don't know. We all hope interest rates are coming down. We hope, we hope all the scams go away. You want my crystal ball? I hope scams go away. I hope interest rates come down. I hope, we have a great, busy, vibrant market. But I don't know if that's the reality.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. I think we're in this transition market right now where, yes, we've been waiting a long time for interest rates to come down. I think we were talking about it before, but most home buyers are aware of what the rates are, right? There's not too many that I'm at least experiencing that are still sitting on the fence. Maybe, during the transition time when rates were increasing, it was a little bit of a shock. Now people are just happy, to be able to get pre-approved, to have slightly more inventory. I would say in the next 6 months, obviously, depending on where the market goes, I think that affordability, no matter with the rates or not, is going to be an issue. I'm seeing that home prices, at least in our area, and particularly in New Jersey, not so much on a national level, but home prices are being supported here. They're continuing to appreciate. You have high property taxes, high insurance, flood zones, like all of this, all of these fees, rates are high. It's unaffordable for most first-time home buyers. So what I think is what I'm starting to see and will continue to happen, hopefully over the next 6 months to a year, is that home buyers are really going to start taking more advantage of down payment assistance programs. So in speaking to so many first-time home buyers who, it's their dream of home ownership, and then when we crunch the numbers, it's either too tight in their budget or maybe their ratios are a little bit too high. So really being able to say, hey, wait, there's this program, right? There's actually 2 programs within New Jersey that you can combine, for up to $52,000 in down payment assistance. And last year, we were able to help 6 families get $52,000 in down payment assistance. That's life-changing, right? So maybe they can buy a bigger house that fits the needs of their family. or maybe they could save a little bit of funds so they have that liquid reserve for inevitably something that goes wrong with the house. But I think this affordability is really going to be a key topic that's going to continue no matter where rates are, just with where home prices are. So how can we help those first-time home buyers be able to afford a house, right? There's limited inventory. There's still quite a bit of demand, at least locally where we are. It's really tough to be a first-time home buyer. So there are down payment assistance options on the state level, the county level, the town level. So I've dedicated the last year to really just understanding those and studying those and working with tools that help me, because every dollar helps, right?
Absolutely.
So I think, in this transition market where we're still trying to, feel out, are we moving more towards a buyer's market? What are we in right now? I think really just focusing on first-time home buyers and helping them to even be able to enter this market is really going to be the biggest thing, at least from me, that I'll focus on the next 6 months.
For sure. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to buyers or sellers moving in and out of Monmouth County, what would that be?
If you're moving into Monmouth County, I think if you're a buyer moving into Monmouth County, and it's all of Monmouth County, don't keep up with the Joneses. Buy what you can afford, buy what's comfortable for you. Look at the school systems. There are so many school districts. You don't have to be in a certain school district. They're all really good, especially if you compare them nationwide. Families coming into Monmouth County, look at the areas that maybe some people, turn their nose down on for some reason. It's just, Monmouth County is such a great area from top to bottom, and there's so many good places to move. You don't have to buy out of your budget. You don't have to live beyond your means, because it's only going to come back and be problematic in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Monmouth County is great. I love Monmouth County, so I'm a big advocate of it. I live by the beach. It's just a great area. But as far as real estate goes, again, hire a trusted team of professionals, because that's going to make your transition into Monmouth County so much smoother.
Right.
Oh, I was just going to add to that, outside of just narrowing down a location, sometimes people have a certain budget or home style in mind. So it's very hard to find what you're looking for in a county that is desirable and there is a lot of demand. So that's when I will introduce renovation programs, because we can look at homes that are maybe $100,000 less expensive than what they were looking at. We can roll the financing cost for renovation into that loan amount, and now it opens up so much more opportunity. So if you are coming to Monmouth County, because you heard it's so amazing, and it is, there are a lot of opportunities out there that maybe other homeowners are overlooking, but you have a program that would help you get into it.
Yeah, for sure. And then for the sellers that are moving out of Monmouth County, maybe they're moving further south, can you just briefly explain what is an exit tax? Do they have to pay an exit tax? And how has the mansion tax changed for sellers?
Absolutely. So everybody calls it an exit tax. It's actually a 2% withholding for non-resident sellers. So that's people who have already moved out of the state. There are exemptions in place. And Josh, feel free to give your legal opinion on this answer.
So
but it really comes down to where you're filing your tax return and where you're declaring your primary residence. If you're filing a New Jersey tax return and you're declaring this property as your primary residence, then you do not have to pay the tax, because you have the exemption. It's for people, for example, they have a New Jersey property, they're living in Florida, they're filing a new Florida tax return, they would have to pay the 2% withholding. And I think it is important, when fees are being discussed and we do these net sheets with your sellers, that they know that up front, because 2% of the sales price is a lot of money.
Yep.
On top of that, back in July, the new mansion tax laws came into effect, which switched the obligation from the buyer of a home over $1 million to the seller. And it's a sliding scale from 1% to 3.5%. It starts at $1 million at 1% and goes up from there. So I think it is important for them to factor in all of these costs. They also have realty transfer tax. If they're not paying the non-resident tax, then they have the realty transfer fee. There are exemptions for that as well, and partial exemptions. For example, somebody over the age of 62 gets a substantial exemption from their realty transfer tax. But all of these fees have to be laid out, because it comes down to numbers. At the end of the day, it comes down to how much am I selling my property for, what are my closing costs, and what am I buying my next property for? And that's in any market. Whether you're in, $100,000 market, $1 million market, or a $10 million market. It all comes down to,
What are you netting?
what's the bottom line net?
The mansion taxes. I
Yes.
know I don't want to get off again, but the mansion tax, the way it was rolled out, the implementation of it was just so botched. It's not good. And for our county specifically, I mean, we're in a bubble, right? We're in Monmouth County, New Jersey, and our real estate market and housing prices are not like it is in most other areas. Other areas in New Jersey, yes, but in a lot of other areas in the country, it's not. So, a $1 million home in Monmouth County, that same home, call it in Middletown, that same home that's now valued at $1 million or above was maybe $550 10 years ago.
Correct.
In that $500,000 range. So now you're taking these 2,700 square foot houses, which are wonderful houses. They're great. But when you think of a mansion, that's not what they are. So now if you're mid 40s, you want to downsize, upsize, whatever you want to do, and you want to go sell that house that you bought, 10 years ago, that's another tax now that you as a seller have to pay because someone in Trenton said, well, anything over $1 million's a mansion.
Yeah.
Not in Monmouth County. It's not. And it's sad that that's the way it is. But again, talking about the fees, being open about it, understanding what your costs as a seller are going to be will help a seller be more maybe open to negotiations and inspections maybe because they know exactly what their other costs are.
Right.
For sure. Okay, so quick lightning rounds. What's one myth in your industry that you want to bust once and for all?
So I already answered mine. If you want to, it was about affordability. It's
Okay.
just that I can't buy a home right now.
Okay.
So really just understanding that you should be working with a lender who is going to help you figure out what your finances are, what your comfortable monthly budget is. I always tell clients, practice it, right? If your rent is $2,000 and you're going up to $3,000, practice it, come back, tell me how that felt, right? So even though now might not be the right time for someone to buy, maybe you heard from your cousin that, rates are high or it's very hard to get into Monmouth County. There's not a lot of inventory. I think making sure that you go and talk to a trusted professional and getting what the true state of the real estate market is and how that applies to you and your needs is critical. And it's worth a conversation because it might not be we're buying next month. It might be we're buying in 2 years, but we're going to come up with a plan. So even if you think you can't afford it, I'm going to help you figure out how you can.
And I feel like from the mortgage perspective, the myth that they should wait for rates to come down because they will have more affordability. Well, perhaps, but on my end of things, when rates come down, typically more buyers come out.
That's correct.
And then prices go up.
Right.
So perhaps waiting for the rates to come down, that's a myth of you'll be saving all this money.
Yes, I always say there's a million other people out there like you who are
Waiting.
sitting on the fence waiting for this change of the market that we've been promised for years, right? And as we start to get closer to that and we're starting to see rates now go into the fives, people are re-energized to enter the market that maybe were, waiting for a year or two. But now you have so much more demand. And so if we have so much demand in this small county that we have and not a lot of available inventory, home builders aren't keeping up with, the volume that they need to support this need for home ownership. A lot of people are just, their only negotiation tactic is going to be to offer a higher price. And that's how you get into the bidding wars. It's exactly what we saw in 2020 and 2021 when rates were at their lowest.
Exactly. Myth.
And I wrote this one down. And we hear this all the time. Real estate agents aren't worth it. I hear that all the time. And like any other profession, there are those like lawyers, like title companies, like mortgage companies, whoever, plumbers, doesn't matter. There are people who aren't good at their jobs. A good real estate agent does so much work, makes my job easier, makes everyone's job easier. They make sure the clients are informed. I mean, a good real estate agent is literally taking the transaction from the very, very beginning to the very, very end.
They're the quarterback.
They're the
right?
They are the
Right.
quarterback of the transaction.
Right.
And and again, there's lawyer jokes for a reason, right? So like lawyers, like anything else, there are bad apples, no question.
Right.
But if you find a good real estate agent, whether you're buying or selling, they are absolutely worth whatever percentage they're charging you. I can just say that hundreds and hundreds of transactions. I've worked with excellent realtors. I've worked with not so great realtors. I've worked with no realtors. And I hate when there's no realtor on the file. Because it makes my job more
Agreed.
difficult. It makes my
Yes.
job way more difficult. So I think that's a myth, and you see that on Instagram. You see that all the time, like people, for sale by owner and doing this. Well, I think the statistics are pretty clear too. You do a for sale by owner versus having representation. The representation is sale price is much, much higher. Again, but a good real estate agent, not just any real estate agent. That's my myth bust, I think.
I think that's a perfect segue because I would say, there's been articles about title insurance should be standardized. There should be no title companies involved. But And same thing with real estate. Everything should be online. Mortgages should be online. Click of a button, you get a realtor, you put your house on the market, you get a mortgage, click of a button, you get title insurance. Who's doing all the groundwork? We all know. I think everybody tuning in probably saw from our podcast, it was probably about an hour, how much work goes into every transaction. So I guess that would be the myth for the whole industry, is everything could be online. AI can do our jobs, right? But at the end of the day, who would be doing all of the legwork that makes a smooth transaction for the buyer and seller? Because we know how many things come up behind the scenes that we've been talking about, that if you don't have a physical body there working and using their experience to clear that issue, you probably won't have very many closings.
ChatGPT can't take
Right.
over.
AI can't take over what we do. So,
Although I am getting more referrals from ChatGPT.
All right.
Yes, isn't that crazy?
They're like, I just found you on
Yes.
ChatGPT.
When I say that, I usually hear like, oh, a past client, and now they're saying ChatGPT. I'm like,
Yes.
oh,
Wow.
what did you write? What was the prompt?
yeah.
So true.
Cool.
So how can people reach out to you for guidance? What's the best way to reach out to you?
I would just search Kristen Murphy. I can share my socials,
Yes.
whatever's going to be easier. But yeah, I would just say that.
Okay. How could someone
Same-
find you, Ashleigh?
Same thing. Ashleigh Parker, Acres Title. They can email me, call me directly. Everything's on the web. But my email is very easy. aparker@Acres Title. That's probably the best way to reach out to me.
Perfect.
Or call Nicole.
Or call me.
Yeah, or call Nicole.
Right.
I'll give you the information.
Yeah.
Josh Sclaren, San Bernardino and Citadino. Do a little Googling. You'll find all my information on there as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. And that wraps up today's episode of All Things Monmouth County and Real Estate. A huge thank you to Josh, Ashleigh, and Kristen for sharing such valuable insight. If you found anything helpful or insightful in this conversation, please share this episode with someone who's thinking about buying or selling. And don't forget to follow and subscribe so you never miss an update on all things Monmouth County and real estate. Until next time, I'm Nicole Rabbat Levine, and I'll see you in the neighborhood.